Kevin, welcome to the Sales Code Leadership Podcast. How are you today?
Happy to be here, Kevin. Good to see you.
Yeah, this is going to get confusing, isn't it, with the two Kevins?
But you must be a nice guy because your name is Kevin, so I'm good with that.
Do you know why you were named Kevin? Is there a family history behind it?
No, I'm the only one that I know of that was named Kevin. I guess my parents probably just couldn't come up with anything else, so it was the default. I don't know. I never asked them.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I'm guessing I'm not going to ask you your age, but I know you're like me. Let's say you're past 39.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I mean, there were often these names come from famous people of the time, don't they? Mm. And you don't. I don't think there weren't many super famous movie stars. There were people like Kevin Costner, who is a little bit older than me, and so I don't know where the name came from, but it's certainly popular with men of a certain age, I would say. So there's a select band of us, and increasingly becoming a bit more popular with younger people again, I notice. I think there's a trend in your family, isn't there?
Yeah, it absolutely must be. So I'm Kevin Kirksey. My son is Kevin Kirksey Jr. and my first grandson is Kevin Kirksey III. So there was reasons why they were named that, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm glad you mentioned my age. Yes, I just did turn 39, so I do appreciate that. So for all of you who want to know how old I am, I just turned 39.
And you're keeping the proud tradition of the Kevin Kirksey name going, which I think is absolutely great. Well, it's a real pleasure to take time with you today. It's a lovely office you have there. Is that in your home?
This is my home office. Absolutely. I don't know if you can see the painting behind me.
I can.
A little bit of clutter off to the side and the back. And it's just, here we are.
Where do you live, Kevin?
Live in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's fantastic. Not been, but I've heard it's a great place. My last boss was a Texan, actually. I shouted him out on the last podcast I recorded, but he's such a great guy. Brian Head. Where does Brian live? Not Dallas, but definitely Texas. So, yeah, I never did get out there, but America's a big country. It's a big place to explore. I'm hoping to get there one day.
You should. It'd be great to have you.
Yeah. Well, let's get straight into it then, with a bit of discussion about your background, if we can.
Sure.
What is it you get paid to do today?
That's a really great question. I wish I could tell you that I get paid to sell technology and create revenue. But when I really think about that, what I feel like I get paid to do is show each team member on my team how to become a better version of themselves, both professionally in selling as well as personally. Because I think these days in sales, there's a personal life component to it that's mixed in with a selling, in my case, technology component that really top sellers are taking advantage of. So I feel like that's my role, and that's what I do for a living.
Well, it's interesting that you were recommended onto this call by a young man who used to work for me before he used to work for you. And so testimony to you that you were called out not by one person, but by two salespeople that said you were the best boss they ever worked for. How does that make you feel?
It's kind of a humbling thing. I've never worked for myself, so I don't know what it's like. But I think it's interesting that one of the gentlemen that used to work for you worked for me. So he or she must like working for Kevin's. It must be a Kevin thing.
It's interesting that he cited you and not me as the best boss he ever worked for. So I've got a slight bit of jealousy. I'm slightly jealous.
Stuff. He just thought,
yeah. I've managed like you. I don't know. I'm sure. I guess I must have managed over time, maybe a couple of hundred people over the past 30 years, and I don't think any one of them has ever said I was the best boss they ever worked for. But my inspiration, a bit like yours actually, is I want to help people to be better leaders, which is why this podcast exists primarily, so that we can all learn from each other, not from just our mistakes, but from our successes as well. So it's just great to call that out as a success, Kevin. I know, because you're probably quite a humble guy, I think, judging by the way that I've heard you speak when we were going through the prep. And so for someone else to say that, I think is a lovely thing. And I'd like to sort of dive into your background a little bit more and then talk about leadership, because there's no question in my mind you are an exemplar of professional sales leadership in the tech sector, and we've got independent references to prove that.
Okay. Right.
But so your job today, helping your salespeople to be the best versions of themselves, is that the role you had in mind at 16?
Oh, absolutely not. When I was 15, 16 years old, all I wanted to do was become a professional baseball player. And here in the U.S., a major league baseball player. I was a pitcher. It's kind of like the quarterback of the team, and that's what I did, and that's what I love. And even today, I still fantasize about doing that. But that's what I wanted to do. I never thought about selling, never thought about technology, didn't know what it was. So.
And you still play baseball today?
No, I gave it up. I got into an adult league a few years ago, and I got up to bat and I hit my first ball, and I'm running. I round second and I pulled my hamstring, and that was it. So I figured, this is for the younger people. This is not for the old guys anymore. So I hung it up. But I had a ball trying.
Well, baseball is not a game, you're probably aware, that is much followed in the UK. But I have to tell you, I'm a big movie fan, and genuinely one of my favorite films is a baseball story. It's originally written by an American author, Bernard Malamud, I think his name is, and it's called The Natural, starring Robert Redford.
I love that movie.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
No, but there's a message in that film as well. There's a message in that film which is because it's about a young man who has an injury, doesn't he? Without plot spoilers, which takes him away from the game that he loved for 20 years, and he comes back as an old guy in baseball terms, like 40, I think.
Yeah. And
because he is the natural, he manages to come back and win. And I think there's something else we might touch on in the podcast today if we get time. What is it that makes great salespeople? What did you have natural salespeople? Maybe we'll come back to that as we go along the line. So your journey into professional selling in the tech sector then, how long were you a bag-carrying sales guy, Kevin, before you elevated into some kind of managerial responsibility?
I think it was probably about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started selling, I wasn't really good at it. And then I just kind of figured a few things out and started getting successes behind my belt. And I was one of those people, you hear it all the time that, oh, you're a great salesperson, top of the leaderboard. It's time for you to be a sales manager. And so I jumped into that. And again, I kind of floundered around for a couple of years, and then I kind of figured out my rhythm and my style. And then it just took off from there. So yeah, I remember those days very, very well. Very vividly.
Was this somebody that was a role model for you as a manager or as a leader?
At the time, when I first got into sales management, no, it was a person that, first of all, recruited me into selling, told me one day over lunch, you're a born salesman and you don't even know it. And so I said, okay, well, I'll give that a try. And a couple of years later, he says, well, I think you're a born sales leader, and I think that's what we need to do with you. And I said, okay, I'll give that a try. So no, this particular person, I think, just had some insights about me that I didn't have about myself. I didn't really particularly think of them as a mentor, but I just kind of went along with the program. And, here I am many years later doing the same thing.
Did you get any training as a sales leader?
No, absolutely no training. Totally on the job, just falling short, getting some successes, trying to figure out what happened and how we got those successes. No, and of course, as you go on in your career, there's professional training. You take the Sandor courses and you starting MedPick and all these different things come your way. But no, when I got into it, was like, combat in a war zone, just on the job training.
I think there's still relatively little training for sales leaders.
Probably. You're probably right.
There is, isn't there? There's a lot of training for sales reps. And bigger companies still invest in that. The smaller ones, the better ones, still invest in it as well. I had the same experience as you. I've been through a lot of sales training. I've read a lot of sales books. I like a good sales book. But sales training for leaders, no. I mean, that's part of my business. That's a solution set that I sell to companies that are prepared to invest in it, but it's not an easy sell. It's interesting. Most of us are expected to pick it up as we go along, which I think means that, and this is my excuse for not always being the best version of myself, you can only learn from your mistakes in a way, can't you?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, I think, it's very possible. I've really never thought about this too much, but you're right. There is very little sales training for sales management. And I think the only opportunity to do that is the science of sales, which anybody can understand and adapt to. But we still find out today the art side of the equation, in my opinion, still prevails. And so how do you teach ingenuity? How do you teach art? It's not that simple. And that may be why there's not a lot going on in that area. Possibly.
Could be. It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Well, let's dive into leadership then.
Sure.
Let's have a look at that. What is leadership for you, Kevin?
It's changed over the years, for sure. I think for me these days, I kind of have it down to a recipe of three simple components. And then I've factored in a couple of what I might call life lessons that help me. The components are pretty straightforward. It started with, in sales, and I think this is true in all sales, not just in technology sales, which is where I am, is that the very, very top sellers make it all about the customer. It's not about me. It's not about it's not about we. It's about you, the customer. What are your pains? What are your needs, wants, desires, wishes, etc. So the people that really excel are making it all about the customer. So, I think about sales managers. I make it all about where they're kind of like my deals, right? You have a salesperson that might be running 10 or 15 deals. As a sales manager, might have 7 or 8 reports. I treat those reports as the deals that I'm working, less the deals that they're working. So that it starts with that. Every single day, I spend some quiet time thinking about each individual contributor that's on my team. What can I do to impact them positively? Every deal that a salesperson is working has a time horizon. It's got potentials. It's got objections and obstacles. The same thing is true with people. And so the first part of the recipe is I spend daily time just thinking through how can I impact positively that person's life and that person's career and their ability to sell more. Second thing I do is I really live and I instill this concept that selling these days technology is a team sport. You have to win as a team and you lose as a team. And it's funny, salespeople, they're mavericks. They want to do everything on their own and they want to go out and they want to conquer the hill and get all the recognition and praise. And it's very simple. I just look a salesperson in the eye and say, listen, when you win a deal as a team, guess who gets all the praise, recognition, and rewards? You do. And if you lose as an individual, guess what people are saying? What's wrong with you? What happened to you? Why can't you do this? I said, so here's the deal. Win as a team because you're going to still gain the recognition. Lose as a team because it quickly turns into a learning exercise for everybody if you lose versus, hey, you're a bad guy. So that's part 2 of my recipe. And part 3 is I had to get to a point where I recognized that my most important asset in sales is the people. That's by far the most important asset. And what that means to me is severalfold. One is it's the single largest investment that I can make as a sales leader. If I worry about how do I spend my time, what do I do as a sales leader? Invest in my people. I treat every report as an individual, as a human being, not just a placeholder, not just a number. I believe, for me personally, I've lived a very long, fruitful, successful, I've been lucky kind of a career. and I've very much enjoyed it. But even today, I still think I can become a better version of myself, professionally and personally. I'm still learning. Every single day, every week that goes by. And so I take that concept and I say, well, if at my age and if my experience level, I can still become a better version of myself, then so can everybody on my team. They can become a better version of themselves personally and professionally. So what am I going to do to inspire that? How can I help them become a better version of themselves? The other thing, a lot of sales leaders don't do this is, at least from what I've seen, I recognize that everybody in my team they're working hard. Some people are successful. Some are having some trouble. Some are losing. They've got a bad streak going on. But at the end of the day, I recognize they're giving of themselves. They're really, really working hard. And so I try to express gratitude toward each of the individuals on my team for that, even in times when it's not going their way. I never micromanage. Everyone hates it. I hate it. Everyone hates it. It's never done any good. So I'm like, stop the madness. Let's just not do it. I mean, if it doesn't work, don't do it. I've never seen it work. So, I mean, I just don't do it. The other thing I try to do is, companies these days, particularly in technology, they really are all about the science. How many calls have you made? How many appointments have you set up? How many of this? How many of that? Let's add it all up. Let's see what we can do from the data. That's all great and fine. As salespeople tend to resist reporting all those kinds of things in the CRM system that they're using. What I've done that I've seen work really well is I just have to show salespeople how doing that it isn't serving me. It's not serving the company that you work for. It's actually serving you. It helps you become better at what you do, better organized, sell more, make more, get more rewards. And when that light bulb goes off, it tends to make it work really easy. So I'm proud to say, knock on wood, every team I've ever had in the last 10 to 12 years, we've never had an issue with reporting or forecast accuracy or anything. It just happens because I show them why it matters to them.
You've never had a problem with forecast accuracy?
In the last 10 to 12 years. Very it was all over the map.
How do you measure it, forecast accuracy?
Forecast accuracy there's a very well. There's a couple. Because
the reason I say that is I've always struggled to measure it. Right? I mean, there's a sort of an easy way. You can look at Rep A forecast at the beginning of the quarter in terms of numbers, and you can say, what did that rep actually close? How were they actually meeting their quota? Were they meeting their commitment? How close were they to their original forecast? Is one way of looking at it, right? But actually, that doesn't tell you everything because deals could have come and gone, and it's masking maybe a lack of forecast accuracy. So if you've got a better way of doing it, I'd love to know because I never really figured it out myself.
I don't know that it's a better way, Kevin, and I don't actually know if there is a way to do it. What I tend to do is I tend to force really hard what reality is. As a matter of fact, just last week I was telling my team, listen, we're going into a new year. We're going to make sure our pipelines are squeaky clean. And I just want reality. I don't want to hear what you want me to hear. I just want to know if you plan to close nothing in all of 2024, then tell me I'm not closing anything. That's reality. I want to hear that. So it starts with reality. And then what it does is in the world of CRMs and pipeline, you have all this pipeline. You can break it down into what's committable, what's most likely, what's best case, what's pipeline, all these categories and stages. And at the end of the day, we lay all that out. And then I say, okay, what's your call? Every week that goes by. Now, what I do to measure it, I stamp it monthly. So, Kevin, if you were on my team, you'd tell me about your pipeline. You'd tell me what you're committing. You'd tell me this. And I say, okay, what are you calling for the company? Well, what do you mean? What am I calling? What are you telling yourself when you look in the mirror that you're going to close for yourself and your family and for this company? What's your call? And they give me a number. And I ask this every single week, but I timestamp it at the end of each month in a quarter. Then I average out those timestamps, and then I compare that average to how we what the results actually were. And I'm typically within 5 to 7 to maybe 8% off, like clockwork. And again, I'm not going on record saying this is the way to do it. I'm just going on record to say this is how I've done it, and it's served me well over the years.
Yeah, that's all. Nice. I like it. Well, let's put you in a hypothetical situation, a situation you've probably been in a few times, though, right? Let's say that you've just landed yourself a new job. I'll make it easier than that. Actually, I'm sure you're very happy where you are. Let's say one of your peers, someone of your kind of level, has come to you saying, look, Kevin, I just landed this new job, sales leader of a growing B2B SaaS company. And they've asked me to put together the 90-day plan. And they want me to cover these three areas in this plan. They want me to cover strategy, which is about planning, culture, which is about people, and execution, which is about process. Where would you start? Where would you recommend I start? That's the question to you from your mentee.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Haven't had anybody call me lately to ask me that.
I just did. That's it.
No, so let's just imagine that you called me and asked me. First of all, I would probably start by saying, get a real serious assessment of everybody that you'll be responsible for and accountable for in the equation. So your team, I mean, where are they on the spectrum? Are they doing well? Are they walking out the door? Get an assessment of your team. Then what you have to do is you've got to get an assessment of what your target is. So this becomes the execution side of it. So, all right, Kevin, what are they asking you to do? Are they asking you to close $10 million worth of sales in the first month or the first year? What are they asking you to do? Because at that point in time, you have to work backwards. And this is where I think a lot of people miss it. They don't, it's like back in the olden days. Kevin, you probably remember this. If your family was going to go on a vacation, and let's say you live in Bristol and you all wanted to go to a place somewhere in London for a vacation, what did you do? You pull out the map and you route how you're going to get there, how you're going to get to that location.
I still do. I'm a bit old school. I've got a AA Route Master map on my shelf in my study here.
Right. Well, of course we have Google Maps these days.
I know.
Where you're going, it tells you what to do. But
it does.
Back in the days when I grew up, you had to go to the gas station. You had to buy a physical map. You had to bring it home. You had to open it up, and you had to pencil out where you're going. And so in sales, it's the same thing. How do you know where to go unless you know where you're going? And so if you said, all right, Kevin, they're asking me to close $50 million in the first year, you have to then mark that, and then you got to work backwards. What has to occur along the lines every week, every day, every month, every quarter to get to that $50 million? You'll quickly realize that you have the team to do it, or you'll quickly realize you don't have the team to do it, or the number of people, and you start filling in the pieces and the components. So it's people, it's execution. Strategy is once you know where you're going, once you assess the people that you have to get there, once you have the map, the strategy now is, so how do I get to that first data point? How do I get to the second data point, et cetera? That's going to lead me to that. And that's probably what I would advise you to do.
That's a very well-rounded answer. I like that. Where are you most comfortable, do you think, in those three areas? Are you stronger in one of those areas than another, would you say? Or what do you enjoy?
I think I've been told I'm pretty good at the people assessment part of the equation, and I'm told I'm pretty good at the strategy side of the equation. And it's interesting that you asked that, because I often tell people that my measure of success, believe it or not, in sales, isn't did you hit your number for the quarter, isn't how much money did you make. Believe it or not, my measure of my success is how collaborative my team is with me. Meaning this, Kevin, if my phone isn't ringing from my team constantly, then I must not be of value to them. But when my phone's ringing all the time, hey, Kevin, this is Joe. I'm running into a problem on this deal. I don't know what to do. Any suggestions? Or, hey, Kevin, I just advanced the ball here. Am I where I need to be? So I find myself in a situation, and I don't know how I do this. I wish I could explain it. I just find myself in a situation where the teams I have, it's like they want to pick up the phone. They want to talk to me. They want to open up. They want to be transparent. They want to tell me where they're weak, and they ask for some help. And so to the extent that I'm getting that collaboration and that momentum and rhythm is a measure of how I look at myself, if I'm doing it right or not, believe it or not.
Well, let's turn the lens around the other way and look at salespeople, which, as you say, really the salesperson in many ways is your customer, isn't it? It's the person you're here to serve.
Yep.
And you and I, as you say, we've both been doing this sort of thing for a while. So I'm interested in your reflections on what makes a great salesperson today, and if that has changed or how it's changed in the past 10 years, maybe.
Yeah, it's a great question. When I think of, well, first of all, there's not one size fits all. As you know, Kevin, you've seen sellers that are highly successful, that their approach is very different than other sellers who are also highly successful. You've seen sellers that know the product inside and out, success, and then sellers that err on the side of relationships. So some of the commonality that I actually look for and that I see coming out is a couple things. One is, first of all, it starts with not above advisement, always learning. So if I have a salesperson that's, I don't need to learn, I don't need to ask, I don't need to be coached, I don't need to talk about, I got it all figured out. That's called being above advisement. That'll never work. As a matter of fact, side story, and I'll get back to answering your question.
We love a side story on the podcast. Don't worry, Kev. We'll go for that. Okay. That side stories are good. Yeah.
All right. So the side story to that is, this was about maybe 12 years ago. I had a gentleman who, by a large margin, was the number one producer in the world for the company that I was running global sales for. This particular person was above advisement. And I saw that it was a little bit poisonous internally. And I went to the CEO and I said, Mr. CEO, I'm going to fire this guy. I know he's the number one producer. I know that it will probably hurt the revenue in a significant way. I'm going to fire him. The CEO looked at me and said, do it. And so what I did, I shocked the company. I fired this gentleman immediately. And I told him why. I wasn't just saying here out of a job, because he was like, wait a minute, I'm producing far more than anybody else. I said, but you're not. And so that happened. I thought, oh boy, did I just make the biggest mistake of my career?
I can imagine that might have been going through your mind.
Every salesperson came to me within a 48-hour period and said, I'm glad you did that. It's about time. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's nice, but have I really screwed up with our revenue of the company? And that particular year, we surpassed any expectation we would ever surpass. It's like the rest of the team rallied and they came to me. And so my lesson is, I don't really care for salespeople that are above advisement. The next one is, these days you have to be a chameleon. You have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to, every customer, every requirement is different. You can't just say, this is how I'm going to sell this deal. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to become look for people that are a student of the prospect, understand that company, go read reports on them, see what their 4K looks like, see what their KPIs are like, just understand the business that they're in. You've got to absorb as much information. So I call it becoming a student of the prospect. And then the other thing, and this is not rocket science, this is just intuitive as all get out, is you have to be able to uncover needs, wants, desires, wishes, pain points at all levels, not just in technology, maybe at the engineering level, maybe at the project manager level, maybe at the CIO, CTO level. You've got to uncover what they're looking for. A big one these days is fearless. You've got to be able to run as many sales cycles on a deal as needed. So if you're selling to a large enterprise customer, you're not just doing one sales process. You might have to be doing it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times to win a deal. And you've got to thrive on pressure. You've got to thrive on competing. And then in the back of your portfolio, as terms of your process, you always have to generate the +1. So, Mr. Customer, I'm a differentiated product. As you can see, I'm solving these problems for you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And oh, by the way, here's the +1 benefit that you get out of this. If you stick to this +1 concept, you tend to have an advantage. So those are some of the things that I think they're some of the characteristics, if you will, of really top salespeople, at least in technology. I don't know about the food services business or anything else, but selling technology these days, that's what I would say.
Do you think that good salespeople are dedicated students of the art and science of selling?
Do I think they're dedicated to both?
Yeah.
Some are.
Mm-hmm.
That is a pivotal question that continues to prevail in selling today, because it tends to be the executive leadership teams think it's just a science. That's all it is. I can go get anybody, help show them the science of selling, and they're going to produce. Guys like me say, no, that's not the case. Guys like me would say it's both important. The science of selling is important, and the art of selling is important. So the people that use use science only as a framework and as a guide, but art to execute, those are the people that get to the top. It's in other words, what I guess I'm saying in another way is the art of selling prevails over the science of selling all day long, but both are now required in modern day technology selling.
No, I completely agree with that. I actually think, and I think it's more than a hope, but I actually believe that artificial intelligence is going to remove the need for a lot of the science stuff. And actually the value that we're going to be able to add is increasingly on the art, on the people, on the human side of this sort of conversation. That's my theory. And I think it's a logical one, but we'll see how that pans out in the next 10 years. You and I keep an eye on the market and see what's happening. Do you know, this conversation has sped along so quickly. I'm going to have to run into a couple of closing questions, but
sure,
we got time to ponder them. So you don't need to rush these, because I'm really interested in your reflections. The first one is, what is the one thing that you wish you knew at the beginning of your sales career?
I wish I knew the power and the potency of the people aspect of selling, the relationship aspect, the ability to listen to another person, to really understand where they are. We all know that that's important these days. But when I first got started in selling, I wanted to become an expert at my product. I wanted to make as many phone calls as I possibly could, right? I wanted to uncover that somebody may have had an interest in the product that I was selling. I want to immediately send them a quote to buy it. I wasn't looking at what the really important things were that over the long haul are going to reap the most rewards. I had to learn that over time. So if I were to coach somebody that just got their first job in sales, that's where I would spend my time.
And how would you go about studying that, do you think, or learning more about that? Are there books that you would recommend? Are there people you would follow? Give me some thoughts, Kevin.
I'm sure there's a ton of books out there, and knowing that you're a movie buff, I'm sure you can come up with a number of movies that would give these kinds of lessons, whereas I can't. I tend to like to break things down in just to normal day-to-day human experiences. Mm-hmm. I mean, just think about things that work in a relationship, right? Yeah. If a relationship is one-sided, it doesn't work. You know, I'll give you an example, Kevin, and this is true. I can't make this up. I was one of these people early on in my marriage where I was more of the reckless person, and my wife was the foundation, the solid person. And you know, I got to a point where I was probably in the process of wrecking my marriage. Thank God I didn't, because I'm married to the most beautiful woman inside and out I could ever imagine having in my life. And the light bulb moment went off for me when I said, you know what? Maybe I need to stop thinking about myself. Maybe I need to stop looking in the mirror and saying, it's about my career. It's about me. Maybe I just need to, guess what? Become a student of my wife. What does a student mean? You go to class every day. You learn, you contemplate, you test yourself. You know, what is she like? What is she like? What is she not like? Why? You immerse myself. And so I became this person that if I were to go in a store and buy my wife a pair of shoes, they'd say, what shoe size does she have? I go, I don't know. Or buy her a dress, what dress size? I have no clue. I can not only do all that today, but I can walk into a store and I can look around and I can tell you if there's something in that store my wife would enjoy, and if there is, which one is it, et cetera. And I do this And all it became was become a student. And so getting back to the question at hand about a brand new person getting into sales, I think just think about real life things. Think about how do relationships work? That's exactly how sales does it. And don't do the things that wreck a relationship. Do the things that foster a relationship. That'd probably be off the top of my head what I'd say about that.
I think it's it's definitely, I think it might be number one actually in the 7 Habits from Stephen Covey. I guess you read that book.
Yeah.
Seek first to understand. But most people seek first to be understood.
Interesting. Yeah, to make it about themselves, right?
Yeah.
About me.
Yeah.
Don't do that. That's a hard lesson. But boy, when you learn it, your life changes. Absolutely.
Doing this podcast has been a great exercise for me in that respect.
Because I probably learned tons and tons.
Oh, well, I've learned a ton, you see, and I remember a couple of people said to me, in fact, I probably overdid it on the earlier podcast because I used to ask questions and then shut up. And a couple of my good friends said to me, you ought to challenge these statements a bit more and get more of a conversation going. So I've started to try and balance it out. But at the end of the day, it is fundamentally about you, right? Because people want to hear about you. And if they want to hear about me, that'll be a different podcast. I've really enjoyed hearing about you and your reflections on leadership and sales, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll give you just one last question.
Sure.
Which is, bear in mind, you're a pretty busy guy. You've got a lot going on. You've got this senior sales leadership role, lots of different big deals to close. What is it you do to unwind at the end of a busy day?
First and foremost, I enjoy my family. I enjoy spending time with my wife. We've been married for 42 years. I hope I make it another 42. I have 2 wonderful grandchildren that live close. So I just really enjoy time with them. And when they're tired of time with me, what I do is I've dedicated my life to giving back and paying it forward to the healthcare industry. I had a rather unusual health scare a number of years ago where I was facing a very high probable fatal event and didn't know it. I had emergency surgery to save my life, and I learned something from the healthcare space about setting an example of giving and giving and giving and not asking for anything in return. And so I've decided to give back in a big way. And so I write articles. I've had articles published. I'm not a clinical person. I'm just a guy, but I've had articles published on patient experience, and I go speak to healthcare and hospitals about how to improve that side of the equation. And so, like when my family is tired of me being around, I'll just be in my office and I'll think about these things and how can I give back. So thank you for asking. I mean, that's the important part in life for me is my family and what can I offer this world that maybe will place some value on it.
Well, I've enjoyed spending time with you, Kevin. It's been a great conversation.
Likewise, Kevin. We should do this again sometime.
You'd be surprised. We may well do that. In the meantime, I'd like to thank the listener. Please do leave us a review if you like what you've heard. It helps to boost the ratings enormously.